Hi. Hi, my name is Heather Hottenstein, and I am joined today with my dear friend and colleague, Andy Higgins. And we are excited to be here, be part of RNUG. And for the next hour, we're going to be telling you about how you can take your skills in Domino and transfer them into learning how to be an Office 365 administrator. And also, if necessary, how you can configure the two technologies to work together in your environment. A little bit about me and my backstory. I am coming to you today from Houston, Texas in the United States. And I was very fortunate in my life that right out of college in early 1994, I started working with a company that specialized in providing Lotus Notes services. At that point, it was Lotus Notes 3.0. But for the last 26 plus years, almost 27, I have been loving this roller coaster ride. And just absolutely, it's been rewarding to see the product mature and grow over the years. Also, during that time, I have focused on the systems administration side of Domino. So doing Domino deployments, upgrades, email migrations, interaction between Domino and other systems, and also troubleshooting crazy server issues for multiple days without sleep. So pretty much been there, done that. And I have for the last 15 years worked for a company, RPR Wyatt, which is based also here in the United States. We are a HCL business partner. We were previously Lotus and IBM. And we provide consulting services both with application development and systems administration of Domino. And we also build third-party products that assist with the administration of the Domino server. Andy?
Over to me. Well, I'm in Texas too, but I'm about 250 miles west of where Heather is in the capital of Texas called Austin. And it's a beautiful day. I have no idea what temperature is in Celsius, but it's about 70 something degrees Fahrenheit, because the Americans still use Fahrenheit, unlike the rest of the world. Anyway, and by the way, I'm not American. I'm English. But I live in Texas. Okay, I'm the founder and head consultant at IMCollaboration. Well, you can read all this. I've been working with Domino pretty much almost as long as Heather. I came from the coexistence email integration world. Before I moved to the States, I lived in Switzerland, and I did a lot of X400 work back in the 90s when we were using the X400 protocol to coexist, integrate computer email systems. And of course, the SMTP came along, and that seems to have taken over from X400. But I've always been interested in integration of directory and more recently, collaboration systems. And at this point, I run a small managed service provider here in Texas for small, medium businesses. That's what SMB stands for. I do a lot of support on Office 365. I recently migrated a larger company from Notes in the Cloud when it existed to Office 365, and how we got here. The slide just changed, Heather.
Well, you kind of were leading into that, so I thought I'd help you.
Was that like at the Oscars where they're like trying to get you off? They play the music. Okay, so enough about me. Let's get on with the presentation.
No, please. You were shifting into your history, and that's where we're heading. So please continue on.
Okay, not a problem. Yeah, I mean, basically, I've been doing for the past 4 or 5 years now. I've been doing Office 365 administration. I got into it big time in 2014 when I migrated a client on the West Coast from Exchange on-premise to Office 365. So I've been around a while in this. I've done Domino for 20 plus years. And so there's a lot of similarities, and there are some differences. And they both the systems can coexist together. It makes sense in some places for them to coexist, particularly in the application side. Anyway, So that's basically my background. Let's take it away, Heather.
Absolutely. So, as I emphatically said in my opening statement, I love Domino. I bleed yellow. It is my true passion. It is my first love. But, as an administrator, ever since, like the mid 90s or late 90s, excuse me, from a competitor's perspective, you had to be aware of what Microsoft was doing. It was Microsoft Mail, and then in late 90s, this Exchange thing came out. So I always had to be aware of Exchange and work with it a little bit. However, about 6 years ago, also the 2014 timeframe, I had a major client that went to Office 365. They migrated off of the Notes and Domino platform. And at the time, I was their Domino email administrator, and their end user helped us support for email issues and also some work that needed to be done in iNotes. They approached me and said, "We love you. We want you to come with us to Office 365. And there was that initial, like, I don't like Microsoft, but I really like the client. And learning new technologies is something I've always embraced. So I took the plunge. And I will absolutely admit that at this point in my career, my world is divided 50-50. I spend half of my time doing Domino administration and consulting services, and I spend the other half doing Office 365 work. So, and that's basically, I want to share today my story and how I took my Domino skills and learned Office 365. So, exactly, the components of both and how they line up. I'm going to talk for a moment about the Domino and Notes side of the house, and then I will allow Andy to discuss Office 365 stuff. So, as we all know, Notes and Domino, it is just this incredible collaboration platform that allows people to work together. And the way that it was originally architected and still works today, it is a client-server technology. So you have end users that are talking against a server that's typically in a data center on-premise or somewhere within the world that the users access. And yes, it provides email and calendar and contacts. People can get in touch with each other. But really, the true power of the platform is the ability to build applications that run your business. They can be anything from as simple to a database that you create off of a template that ships with the product, or you can build complex applications that run your workflow. And then there's also the instant messaging way of collaborating, and that is done through the same time server. Now, one of the beauties of Notes and Domino that I have always loved and I've touted as an advantage are the multiple platforms that are available. They don't just say, hey, you have to use this OS, or hey, you can only use this one client. Instead, they give you options. So on the server side, multiple operating systems, and yes, some have come and gone over the years. Like, for example, when I got involved, OS2 was the biggest platform. That one fell away. But we have today Windows, Linux, AS400, AIX, and also the ability to deploy Domino servers as Docker containers. And then from the client side, you can use that full, rich Notes client, or you can give your users a smaller footprint of an option, like, for example, using the web browser for iNotes versus on-premise. Also, you have the ability to go mobile, and that's where you have Traveler, and you also have Nomad, which came about in the last couple of years and allows you to use the Notes client on a mobile device. And then also, believe it or not, you can use Outlook to access your Notes, email, calendar, and contact data. So now let's talk about that evil 365 thing and what it contains.
The evil 365. Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way a little bit about this, because I did work for IBM for 5 years as on the SWAT team, which is the acronym used for Special Weapons and Tactics, but it's also used when you're in a situation which is a dangerous situation. And IBM found themselves in that situation with Microsoft taking over a lot of their clients. So they had a special group of people who would go out and talk to the clients about the benefits of Domino over Microsoft. And so I'm thoroughly on board with what Heather's saying about Domino. Domino is it's a single server that you can run all this stuff on. And it's constantly amazed me that Microsoft, having multiple servers and multiple functionality all over the place, seems to win out against a single solution, which is Domino. Regardless, I'm a technical person. Domino, I appreciate Domino more than I do Office 365. Speaking of Office 365, of course, the main Microsoft drive is to put everything in the cloud. They're not interested in selling on-premise stuff. So Domino remains a great on-premise solution. Microsoft is in the cloud. So it's a subscription-based cloud service. Recurring revenue is the #1 thing. Of course, email, etc. It does pretty much the same. Exchange is a very good email system. It's good at what it does. It's Exchange, it's mail. SharePoint, I've had a love-hate relationship with SharePoint for a long time, simply because they tried to make it seem like it was the solution for what Domino did. And in 95% of the cases, it was. But those 95% were the simple cases, like discussion forums, like document libraries. It didn't solve the full application side of things which had been built on Domino for 20 plus years. And so SharePoint is effectively a list-based database, which is good, again, at what it does, but it doesn't supplant or it doesn't replace Domino applications. Teams is the latest version of instant messaging. Skype for Business is going out the window. That's what deprecated means. Outlook and Outlook Web Access, those are both email access. The big thing on the Microsoft side is the Power Suite, but it's very expensive. So again, if any of you managed to look at my presentation yesterday about the comparison between the Domino app environment and the Power Suite app environment from Microsoft, there's a cost differential there, and Domino is so much cheaper. So if you've got customers on Domino, convince them to stay on it, because it makes no sense. They can live in a coexistence like what we're going to show you on this presentation, and use both. Over to you, Heather.
All right, so now let's talk about directories, because regardless of which system you're on, the directory is the central part of your platform. And in Domino, as it has been since version 1.0, you have that used to be called the public address book, or name and address book, but it always had the same file name of names.nsf. And that database is contained or replicated on each Domino server that's part of your Domino domain. Now, you can also, it's been around, I think, since version 7 or 8, the concept of having a configuration directory. It's basically a stripped down directory that you can deploy to remote Domino servers. But I honestly don't really know any customers or consumers of Domino that are doing that. Rather, everyone tends to have a full replica of that address book on each Domino server. And then, of course, there's what Microsoft does.
Oh, and that's over to me, right? not that Heather doesn't know about Microsoft, but we've decided to split the presentation this way. So Active Directory, I think everybody is familiar with Active Directory, whether or not you've just concentrated on Domino. It's such an all-pervasive solution out there. One thing I'd like you to take away from this is Azure Active Directory is not exactly the same as Active Directory. It's a subset of Active Directory. It doesn't do some of the functionality, particularly if you buy the licenses, the base licenses of Office 365. In order to get the full functionality of an Active Directory in the cloud, you have to pay more. You have to get one of those Azure Active Directory P1 or P2 licenses. So bear in mind that's something we will come to. Also, hybrid considerations when talking about Active Directory. If you're moving to the cloud, if you're a company over 100 people, you need to seriously consider hybrid as your model, because you will always have something that you need to do on premise. And if you move total cloud, like I know one customer, 130,000 users, they moved to all cloud, and they got in a mess and they had to move back. And moving back is a big issue. You don't want to be doing that. So hybrid, to me, is the way to go on the Office 365 side. Thank you.
So then delving into each directory and what it has available for you. In the Domino's directory, it allows you to not only manage your users and groups and resources, but also it has a multiple document structure that allows you to actually manage your Domino servers and how they communicate. So, just at a high level, of course, we have that person document. Now, a Domino person document can either be for just a person or it can be a registered person, meaning they actually have a NOLTS ID. For group documents, you have multiple types of groups. You have the multi-purpose, which of course can be used anywhere. And you have server only, which means they can only define servers and only servers are going to be recognized as valid members. ACL only can only be used in either server access control list or database access control list. So you can't send emails to an ACL only group. And in the same vein, you have mail only groups that you just send mail to. You don't use them in ACLs. And then there's also your deny access list. And the deny access list is, of course, where you list users that are no longer part of your organization. Mail-in databases, those are where you create a notes database, you create a mail-in database document, and then using the respective email address, you can actually deposit email into that database. The resources, that's the room and reservation system. So you can define rooms and resources by using those respective documents. And of course, there's that server document, how there's so many tabs in that document. And I always recommend this, that if you have either inherited your environment or you haven't looked at your server document in a while, go and look at it and give yourself a little bit of audit, not only with the server document, but all of those other documents that are used to manage Domino, because especially as you learn more, you're going to figure out ways to more effectively manage those documents and the information that's contained in them. The configuration document, very similar to the server document. I kind of think that they were split up at some point just because the server document was getting so big, but the configuration document kind of works side by side there. And of course, there's connections, how our Domino servers communicate in terms of replicating and routing email. If you're a small environment, they're probably doing a peer-to-peer architecture. They're talking directly. If you have a lot of Domino servers, then you're probably doing some type of tiered architecture, hub and spoke. And then there's the program documents where I can actually say, I want a program like a maintenance task called Compact to run on my Domino server twice a week. I can say what days of the week, what time it's going to run. I can even provide options. The policy and settings documents, if you're not doing policies today, you need to, because within Domino, those allow you to really control the end user experience. And then finally, another configuration of the Domino server is using these websites, website documents, because they allow you to, with one-stop shopping, control how the web system is being set, or the websites are being served up, and also the security around them. Now, what does Active Directory give us in terms of directory stuff?
Okay, well, you've got users that are represented. Actually, I think we probably should add a guest user on there as well, because
yeah,
that is an additional user, but it's typically added in the Azure Active Directory side. From a mail side, you have mailbox users, mail users, and mail contacts, which are essentially users who have mailboxes on the Office 365 system, users who have mail that's responsible but not on Office 365. So that could be a local Exchange server, but it could also be a Domino mail user. So, and then the mail contact is like a contact user, like a contact list that you want to share of regular contacts around the company. Groups, there are these groups, and then there's also, I think I should have I was probably responsible for updating this and I forgot. There's an additional group on there, which would be Teams groups,
Oh,
or
yes.
called
Right.
Office 365 groups, which actually complicates things enormously if you don't educate your users. And I don't even want to go into that. If you want to know more about Teams groups and being careful, read on the internet, see what problems people have come up against, because it's a lot of functionality that you bring in. Regardless, distribution groups, well, that's pretty obvious, and dynamic distribution groups are interesting because they dynamically change based on rules that you set up when you set up Office 365. Security groups, it's obvious what those are. We have mailing groups too. They have mail-in security groups that can be used for both processes, and then you have groups, as in Teams groups. Shared mailbox is the same thing as a mail-in database for Office 365. It's actually free on Office 365. You can have as many shared mailboxes as you like. So yeah, and everybody can access them. Well, sorry, not everybody. You can. We have access control limitations to how people can access them. And then resources, well, not to get into that too much, but you have resources like conference rooms and printers and things that you can allocate in the directory and manage that way. So it's like, I mean, really here we're talking about Azure Active Directory. So it's, as I say, it's a subset of what we've been, what we know as Active Directory.
Right.
Over to you.
A couple of things I just want to add here. First, all about the shared mailboxes and them being free. That is true unless you want to do a legal hold against the shared mailbox. Like, for example, I have government clients that all of their email that comes in has to be on a legal hold up to X amount of time. And in order to do that, you do need a license against for that mailbox. Also, another thing I wanted to mention just in terms of being an administrator, that when you come to groups and group members, is that you can't just freehand enter in a value. Like, for example, in Domino, if I want to create a group and I want to put in some people that are outside of my organization, in that membership list, I can just put in like J Smith at widgets.com. Within the Azure Active Directory and also the on-premise Active Directory, you have to first create a mail contact document. And in that mail contact, you define the person's name and their email address. And then in the group document, you select the values of your users that exist either as being mailbox users, mail users, or mail contacts. So it's just something to keep in mind, that if you have a lot of contacts outside of your organization that are in groups, you will need to create respective mail contact documents for those individuals. All right, so then how we manage the system. Well, in Domino, because I have a Domino server that's typically on premise, it could be in my company's cloud, but it's still a Domino server, and I'm going to still use the same utilities or methods for managing that server. So first of all, with the user interface, I have an administration client. That administration client has been around since, I think, version 5.0, and yeah, it's had some changes over the years, but for the most part, it's pretty much the same. And I use that admin client for registering my notes users and for working against my Domino directory, creating program documents. So I can run reports against my server. Like, for example, if I have a cluster, I can do a cluster analysis to see what databases exist on the cluster members and how I might need to clean things up. Also, I have the ability to manage Domino through a configuration file that's just text-based called the Notes INI. Also, these Notes INI parameters, and as a best practice, really should go into the server's configuration document, but you still have that Notes INI file that's local on the Domino server that you need to be aware of. And then probably my most favorite feature of the Domino server is that live console. Just being able to sit there, see error messages as they go by if I'm troubleshooting a problem. Or one of the things I really like to do when I'm getting to know a new customer's environment is just sit there and watch the Domino server. What is it doing as its normal operations? How much email is it sending? what servers is it talking to, that type of thing. And then when it comes to managing my Domino server and being proactive or reactive, if I'm troubleshooting a problem, I have different areas I can go and get information. The biggest one is the log file, always been known as the log.nsf. It's just another database that's on your Domino server. You have other systems like the Events and Statistics database, which then evolved into DDM, the Domino Domain Monitoring application. But ultimately, those are your different possibilities of managing a Domino server. Now, how does Office 365 compare?
Well, there's a lot of management in Office 365.
A lot of differences.
Yes, the difference is, well, it's all web-based again, right? I think this is obvious in every one of these slides. Domino is on-premise. Microsoft is web-based. Even when you have Domino in the cloud, provided by one of the partners, I forget the name. What's the name of the partner?
Prominent.
They provide webs. They provide not software as a service essentially, but servers as a service, hardware as a service, right? And so Microsoft are concentrating on software as a service. So you have admin centers. And of course, when you have admin centers, you can't get at everything. You can just get at what they present to you. So you have the Exchange Admin Center and an Azure Active Directory Center, you have a Teams Admin Center, you have a SharePoint Admin Center, I go on. You also have specific admin centers based on security. For example, there is a security admin center that points at different parts of the other admin centers so you can pull out data and look at how secure your environment is and what the problems are. So it's all well thought out from that perspective, but it is a lot of information and you have to know where to go. And there are trace logs as well within the admin centers. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The sixth bullet point is probably the most important thing that you have to know about managing this stuff, and that's PowerShell. If you already know PowerShell on the local machines, you need to learn PowerShell with the Microsoft cloud stuff, because you can do pretty much anything you want with PowerShell nowadays, which is a departure for Microsoft. They have typically only allowed access to the GUI of their systems. PowerShell, I had a client the other day, we got their SharePoint data. SharePoint is a dog as far as SharePoint administration in the web. It is not good. It's not nice to use, especially when you're talking about manipulating more than 200 files. PowerShell is the way to do it, and it's actually pretty simple, but it's scary because it's a command line, and if you type the wrong thing, it can do something totally wrong. So you have to know it. So one of my biggest recommendations, if you want to do Office 365, you'll learn PowerShell. And then the last thing mentions Exchange on-premise there. We don't really need to go into that, but you need Exchange on-premise if you're going to go with the hybrid that I was speaking of, because it's the same way. You have to have something to be able to manage on-premise as opposed to everything being in the cloud, like with Azure Active Directory, all in the cloud. You lose functionality unless you have that on-premise option. Over to you, Heather.
Right. Just one thing I want to say about my experience with PowerShell, because you said it's scary, and it absolutely is intimidating up front. My first year and a half when I got involved with Notes is I was pretty even administration and development, because back in V3, it was at formula language. And so I learned how to create a Notes database and how to create forms and views and write app function agents, things like that. And then when that whole thing, called Lotus Script came out and started becoming more of a development standard, and you had to know Lotus Script to be an actual Notes developer, it's like, okay, I'm going to go be an admin because I don't want to write code. So now, how many years later, I get thrust into this Microsoft 365 world, and I have to go learn how to write some code. Yes, a lot of your PowerShell that you're going to do would be like 1 or 2 command lines, but when you want to get into some more advanced stuff, you actually have to do some scripting. So, and once again, have to learn like what an if-then is, or a do-while, that kind of thing.
Yeah, but scripting's nice. I've always preferred
Nice.
scripting. Well, no, I've always preferred scripting because I was brought up when I was programming. The programs were like scripts, like they
Right.
weren't this object-orientated stuff that totally loses me.
Absolutely. Yes, I agree.
But yeah, there's a little bit of object-orientated in the data structures nowadays, but that I can get my head around that.
Right.
Anyway.
Oh, too funny. Yeah. So now talking about endpoint management, this is really your access points in terms of what's coming into your environment. For notes, that's pretty much your notes users or your web browser users. And, in the past, when we had all these notes clients running around the world, how, as administrators, you kind of got, I guess you could say, a bit sophisticated or sneaky in how you were manipulating that local workstation. So, like, for example, you could send an email that would have a button. And by clicking the button, it would maybe update something in the location document. You could also do it with a post open event by sending a store form and document. And then, of course, through the maturity of the application, we got policy and setup documents, which make things a little bit easier in terms of controlling because those are more dynamic. They happen at every time the user authenticates against the Domino server. There also are other utilities out there. One that started being included natively with Notes and Domino in very late version of 9, but we can say Domino 10 for all intents and purposes, is Panagenda's Marvel client. And that's something that is now included. You can use to manage your notes and like Nomad client experience. And then finally, for these mobile devices that people have and take with them all over the world, we have the Traveler. And for managing Traveler, probably the most effective database on that Domino server is the Lotus Traveler NSF, where you can actually see what devices people are using, when they last synchronized. There's also text logs on the server, but those tend to be very verbose and take time to read through. So the Traveler is usually where I go first if I'm looking into an issue for a user. And then what does Microsoft give you in terms of managing your people or devices?
So there's a built-in product and the Endpoint Admin Center that used to be called Intune. Microsoft, they've changed the name of the product several times, and they have several products on premise that do the same thing. So it's difficult sometimes to get a handle on exactly what product you need to use. But today it's called the Endpoint Admin Center. And excuse me, that allows you to run configuration, remote configuration on endpoints, and also allows you to check it for compliance to manage those endpoints. Now, as an MSP, a managed service provider with Office 365, I have moved away from using this because my clients have more than just Microsoft Office 365 on their machines. And so I use what's known as an RMM service. Most people would be familiar with something like TeamViewer as an RMM service. I use one called Atera. These are services that allow you to manage my endpoints in a greater world than just Microsoft. That's what I'll say about those. So if you're doing what I'm doing, RMM services are better, I think, than Microsoft's. You have to decide one or the other, really. And then, of course, PowerShell. You can use PowerShell to do anything. So.
So funny. And then finally, we have that mobile access. I just alluded to that a little bit on the last side of what I mentioned with managing those Traveler devices, but that's exactly what we have available to us. Is we have Traveler. We're on a Domino mail server. You have installed a Traveler service that runs under the Domino umbrella, and it allows those mobile devices to connect. They can either use the Verse application, or which is that app that you download off of iTunes or the Google Play Store and install on your device. Or also, like in the case of iOS, you have a native mail app that you can use and configure to go against your Domino server to pull email down. And then there's Nomad. Nomad, total game changer in my opinion. Originally came out for the iOS or the iPad, and then it was extended to the iPhone, and then Android tablet, Android phones, and finally Chrome notebooks. But what Nomad gives you is the ability, with an application on the device to use the actual notes client and open your existing Domino databases with really no code change. And that users can consume the information that's in those databases, they can update documents, they can create new documents. And if they have access, delete, of course. And then what's going to be coming in Domino 12 is Nomad for the web browser. So that means that from any web browser on a PC or a laptop, you can launch Nomad Web and again have that full notes client experience without actually having the overhead or the bulky footprint of the notes client installed locally. And then Andy, do you want to talk about what you have available on the Microsoft side of the house?
Yeah, there's not much to say about that. The Microsoft Mobile Access, there's an Outlook app. Again, there are actually apps for everything else as well on the Microsoft side. So there's a SharePoint app, there's an Excel app, there's an app for just about everything, every piece of Office 360 of the Office 365 client to do apps, and then Power apps. I mean, everything you can do on the mobile. And then, of course, you might want to program your native mail app to use Microsoft Exchange on the back end. Sometimes this is problematic because Microsoft changed their support of security protocols. Mm-hmm. And when they do that, typically the iOS mail app will stop working until they fix it, or you have to do something on the back end to allow the iOS mail app to access it. So I always recommend clients to use the Outlook app because that works without a problem.
Absolutely, I agree with that. And then, yeah, just a little bug that I've come across a couple of times, and of course, the couple of times it's happened isn't with just a general user, it's with some big executive. And it's where when they get a calendar invitation on their device, like the iPhone, they accept it, and they only have native mail configured. They're not using the Outlook web app, or the Outlook app, excuse me. And so they accept it. Well, the device doesn't realize it actually sent the response, whether they're accepting or declining the invitation. So it just keeps sending it. So the recipient is receiving hundreds of acceptances or declines. And, of course, then you have to go and you have to clear it out and everything. And then you have to tell the user, you know what, you might want to use that Outlook app moving forward.
Yeah, to me, it makes more sense to use the Outlook app because, a lot of users use their native mail app on their iPhone for their personal email. And I finally decided I want my personal email separate to my work.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, a couple of things also about that Outlook app that I just want to mention is that, first of all, you can only have one login per mobile device. So if you have two accounts that you usually use against Office 365, you have to choose one of them for one device or have multiple devices. The other thing is that the Outlook, if you're using shared mailboxes, you need to first add that shared mailbox within the interface by logging into a web browser using OA, Outlook Web Access, and add in that shared mailbox. And then in your Outlook app, you will have it available to you alongside of your email.
I might just interject there. Heather, I actually have multiple accounts.
Oh, you have multiple? Okay, you and I need to talk then because I've always been under the premise that it's only one. So you and I need to talk.
I think it was a more recent update to the Outlook app, but you can actually have multiple accounts now. Yes, which is Microsoft moving with the times. Yes.
Excellent. We can put that in a future presentation on how to do it. Excellent. All righty. All right. So just talking about coexistence for a couple of minutes, because I know we're starting to run out of some time here. But bottom line is when you're looking at coexistence for your environment, from a business perspective, you need to first define coexistence and what exactly it is that needs to work together in your environment. Is it the directory? For email, if you are, wanting the two systems to be able to pass email back and forth, it's probably going to be a combination of one, those emails going across to the other system in a acceptable amount of time, but also those emails need to contain the right stuff. They need to look right, just like they would in the other system. So that means inline imaging, MIME content, all of that. Also, your users, when they want to invite people to a meeting and be able to see if they're available at that time, they don't care what mail system they're on. They just want to know if the person's available or not. Also, if you want your users to be able to communicate in an asynchronous fashion, that's where you may be looking at instant messaging coexistence. And then finally, any applications that need to work together in terms of data in one being available in another. So some reasons where you might be looking at doing coexistence. First of all, you had your big boss tell you, we're going to another mail platform. And because of the size of the organization, you're going to be moving in a time frame that's over a couple of months or even years. So you need to have the two work together. Also, you may be in a position where either you have a federated organization where people or different parts of the company are allowed to work separately, and so there's multiple mail systems, or you may have had a merger or acquisition, and for a period of time, those two environments exist independently but have to work together. And then finally, the one that most of us have found us in, Big Boss says, we're moving off of Domino. Everything has to go. You take the email first, pretty easy. Then you start looking at the Domino applications, and very quickly those executives and business owners realize, you know what, we can't do this in anything but Domino. It's going to be too expensive to move, even if we found something else that could do it. So you now have this multi environment where you have both the Domino side and you have the Office 365 side. And in that case, what you're usually looking at for coexistence is those complex applications and those emails that they're spitting out, making sure they're getting to the right recipient and making sure they look correct. And then also on the flip side, any replies that are coming back in, making sure they get delivered appropriately. I'm going to go over the next couple of slides kind of quick because we are running out of time. First of all, email. If we were having this conversation 20, 25 years ago, it'd be totally different. But SMTP email, kind of what Andy said earlier, makes things really easy. So as long as both systems talk SMTP, they can trade emails. Now, with Domino, if it was your primary mail system, you probably are looking at bumping it down to being a subdomain. So that's going to mean some configuration changes in Domino and within your DNS records, both internally and externally. And then also you need to decide what you're doing with your Domino servers if they are still sending email. Are you going to go direct out to the internet, or are you actually going to use like an on-premise Exchange server to relay that email to where it needs to go out on the internet? For these email messages and ensuring that the content looks right, first of all, for doc links, you want to make sure those get correctly modified or changed into a link. And that's done through the configuration document with the option I have here. And then finally is the users. And if for the notes clients, they are forwarding or replying to emails that have an inline image, you want to make sure that you have these things set up properly so that those images actually go versus the dreaded red X. All right, real quick, notes can, like I said earlier, Lotus Notes can actually be an Office 365 client. So your Notes client can go against Office 365 and pull in email, but it is for email only. And as I mentioned earlier, Outlook can actually go against that Domino server and pull in information. And that's done through a separate installer that's downloaded off of FlexNet called HCL Traveler from Microsoft Outlook 3.0. Calendar, basically, as I said, your users, they just want to be able to invite people to meetings. Unfortunately, nothing native in either product allows that. So you're looking at having to go to third-party market if you want the two to interact. Andy, you want to take a moment and talk about instant messaging?
Yeah, there's two ways of doing instant messaging integration if you want to. Buddy list migration, which tends to be done with smaller migrations because it's an immediate one, and then buddy list synchronization, which is fitting for a very, very large organization because you want to make sure when you migrate people over, you migrate the buddy lists, i.e. the people they appear online on the new system. So you're actually migrating you're affecting the buddy lists of the existing users on the other system. If that's too confusing, contact me if you're interested in instant messaging, coexistence, or migration.
Excellent. Directory synchronization, this is where you can have Active Directory on premise do some interaction with Domino. Now, just keep in mind that that is a one-way only, so what's in Active Directory comes downstream to the Domino server. And if you're using the native Domino utility that came about in Domino 11, there are, of course, third-party tools that can do a tighter integration, make that more of a bidirectional integration. But if you actually want to use what came about in Domino 11, which is another server task called DirSync, that's where via LDAP it comes down from Active Directory, and you can do some synchronization. I have a couple of slides here, and of course, all of this information is available through HCL's help documents. All right. Authentication coexistence. Andy, I think this is our last topic. Speaking point, if you just want to spend maybe 30 seconds or so going over it.
Okay, yes, yeah. So, right, so coexistence. You need some way to authenticate people cross-platform. LDAP provides a way to authenticate, but it requires Domino to be the master directory. SAML, I like the SAML opportunity because you can use SAML to log Office 365 people in to view Domino databases. That's OAuth seems to be a solution that's coming, but I don't know enough about it to comment on it as of yet. I've been going with SAML. There's a couple of slides. If you move on, Heather, people can look at this. These are the links in the Domino ideas where people are discussing the whole SAML thing. There's a very good article. Actually, drop back one. There's a good article by Krista Bishop that he tells you how to set it up. Down the bottom, that's the most recent one, and the link is down there. Okay, you can use that to do SAML, and those are a bunch more comments about how SAML can be improved on the Domino side. You can use it. It's about 95% conformant, and this is just an example of a SharePoint site that I set up, and both those are independent views, or what do you call them? iframes right into Domino servers, different Domino servers, different databases on different Domino servers. That's using the team technology product to make it look pretty, but also using SAML to get in there using a SharePoint authentication. It's all doable. It's not tough. And you don't have to move your stuff off Domino, you see? You don't have to migrate it all over to SharePoint and for it to look ugly on SharePoint. You can make it look pretty. You can make it look pretty in SharePoint on Domino.
Excellent.
And yeah, we won't go on. That's another 20 minutes.
Yeah, I know you talked about yesterday application development in Office 365 tools in Microsoft World. So I'm sure your slide deck is available and you're available for questions if anyone has anything.
Absolutely.
All right. So ultimately, Andy and I thank you all for spending some time with us. And if there are any questions, we're more than willing to take them now. Or, of course, our email addresses are there. Feel free to contact us.
Dear friends, thank you a lot for such live discussion. It was really
yeah, this is I think this is the fourth time that Andy and I have presented together, and I truly enjoy presenting with Andy. He's a great colleague.
Yes. So thank you very, very, very much, and go for tomorrow for a new broadcast. For tomorrow we will have a last day. So please connect to us and see all other sessions.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll get some Russian beer or some vodka and join you.
Excellent. I like that idea.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.